process of making over $225 million worth of investments from roughly a period starting about 5 years ago to roughly a period ending 5 years from now to really rebuild all of Ravenswood schools. This is a tremendous public and community investment in our schools. That just represents a number of really, really exciting projects. You can see that on the left-hand side here. And on the right-hand side just highlights all of the different leases, starting with Brentwood and continuing on to the Flood School site in 2120 Euclid, to really sort of improve our overall campus. This doesn't even include some of the smaller projects that we've made, whether those are the solar panels that began their installation in the rainy month of January, to some of the smaller but very impactful leases we've done, or this board's approved, for example, with all 5 to add more early childhood seats. So this has become a little bit of an annual tradition, this January update just on facilities. Today, we're going to focus really just on the 3 sites that are seeing the most change, or most anticipated change. The first is Cesar Chavez Ravenswood Middle School, CCRMS. We'll dive in there first, just talking about some of the exciting progress we made on construction there, the community hub, and as well as some just remaining issues or outstanding needs that we're hoping to address over the next couple of years. After that, diving into Belhaven, which is the site that we've decided to move forward.
Really quick. Sorry, Will, on your last screen, you had MBF. Can you complex?
Yeah, that's magical. Sorry, the Magical Bridge site.
Okay.
Sorry, the Magical Bridge Foundation site. This is the area in the back of the middle school.
Sorry, Will, and since we stopped you, can you also, I don't know if you need to speak a little clearly. I don't know. It's just really like echoey and low. So I don't know if there's another way to enunciate so that we can understand. Thank you.
I will do my best on that. Was this in any way better? I can try and be louder.
That is better.
Okay, I'll try and project a little more. Sorry about that. So turning again to just back here, Belhaven is the site that we're hoping to make the big first investment with a recently passed bond, the bond that passed this past June. That's the focus today. This board has approved a preliminary design for the site. We continue to work on sort of ironing out details, making sure that the overall site plan gets good community engagement, good feedback, and continues to make a lot of sense for the site. What we're hoping to present today is a couple of options for how to sequence the construction at the site and get feedback on 2 approaches that we think are promising and both feasible for the site. And third, and this is a little bit, frankly, I would say unexpected, but we have an opportunity to potentially accelerate Los Robles Ronald McNair that we believe would minimize the impact to the students and families at that site. And so we're proposing actually accelerating Los Robles Ronald McNair. Just want to give a little bit of context about what we're talking about today. And let's dive in straight away to CCRMS. So just exciting news. This December, we completed the modernization of the 2 northern wings on the site. So that's here B7, B6, and we're beginning work on the final wing here, B5. Pretty remarkable milestone in the project for us to be on budget, on time, given the middle of a pandemic and the deluge we got at the end, just to make things a little exciting there. But we're excited that we're opening up 15 brand new classrooms, and we're still excited to open up 2 new buildings, and ideally that other wing all next January. So a little bit annoying to do a mid-year move, but we're excited to open things up and are in sort of the home sprint here. Just to share a couple of photos just about how things are looking at the site. Hoping to get folks there to see it, but you can see brand new furniture, brand new windows, brand new lights, brand new ceiling tiles, so much more, new coats of paint everywhere, sort of nice clean campus, new water fountains. You can see new HVAC units with much higher quality filtration systems. We all learned how important that was during the pandemic. So overall, these modernized classrooms truly are just brand new feeling classrooms, looking classrooms. And we're thrilled to have a week and a half, almost 2 weeks now of students in those classrooms. So a bit bumpy at times getting the folks in there, but just a really exciting overall major milestone for us to open these wings with kids in them and brand new classrooms. So really excited just to share that bit of positive news with the trustees. Any questions just about the overall, or I can pause now just to sort of close out 4A here, just on where we are at the middle school.
No questions.
So we're not done at the middle school. There's still two other things of work I want to talk through. One is the community hub, which we talked about at our December meeting. And the second is a couple of just remaining issues that I want to bring attention to the board, given their sort of bigger ticket changes that I believe are necessary, but still fit under the overall project scope. So first, just turning to the community hub. And these are similar to the slides that we presented last time, so I'm not going to belabor any of the points here. But we're talking about this field here off of Bay Road, which is just a major opportunity to really rethink the sort of district and the overall community and address some community needs that we heard in our engagement, both in our sort of rethinking our facilities footprint and the work we did with the Magical Bridge Foundation to really rethink that site. We're proposing placing potentially up to 3 different things here. One is the community hub. 2 is the 8 to 80 zone, or that site barrier that creates a little bit of buffer between the overall core campus and the field there. 3 would be a new district office. And 4, we're exploring, per the board's direction, housing as well as other options for that space. As mentioned before, we are putting in the 8 to 80 zone some classrooms here to create a little bit more of a physical barrier. So there's a little bit more of a less porous membrane between the overall field down below off Bay Road and the core campus. Make it so it's more of a controlled entrance where we really have eyes on who's coming in on the campus as we think about this overall space. We really are wanting to pay a lot more attention to the overall security of the campus, which is partly why, again, we're building those new buildings, which will create a controlled single point of entry for the overall site. So what we were thinking about initially, and this is now going back over a year, I believe, to the November 18th, 2021 board meeting, we proposed a community hub that looked like this. Now, we didn't have a way of funding it, but we proposed something that had a library, basketball courts, tennis courts, office space, function space, health clinic, other community services, potentially housing, all on one site. And we put this out in the world, and the Sandhill Foundation came in, and they came in with a $30 million donation to create a community hub. So roughly this space here on the left, with full parking, site amenities, a room for the district office, boardroom to meet regularly that perhaps wouldn't have some of the echoing or hearing issues that are coming up today, as well as a bunch of other spaces that are really designed to focus on supporting students. This is, as I mentioned at the last meeting, the biggest ever single donation to the district. This is a lot of work that went into this, negotiating this, finalizing details of this, and a huge opportunity, we believe, for our community to have a space that really meets a lot of the needs that we've heard about over the last couple of years. The gist of this is the district would have access to most of the site during the day. The other areas after hours would really be primarily used by the foundation. We delineated specific uses for the site. So we carved out, these are the specific goals and how they meet and match the district's outlined goals earlier on. The goal is to create a space that really is welcoming, not to the broader community, the Silicon Valley community, the San Mateo community, but really for a Ravenswood community. Really Ravenswood families, community members would have a space to go. We put in specific tiered preferences to make sure that our families have first access or earliest access to the space, and that the space is designed to meet our needs. We wouldn't have an obligation to maintain it, build it, construct it, anything like that. But the board, and we put in very consciously various checkpoints to make sure that the space, even though we're not maintaining it or operating it after hours, is still meeting the needs of our community. So we put in reporting requirements to make sure that, throughout the life of this lease, there is a regular set of touch points for the public to be able to see how it's being used, for this board and future versions of this board to see how the site is being used, and to hold them accountable if the site is not being used the way that we want it to be. That's not something that I've seen common in other leases, and something that we negotiated specifically based on the feedback of trustees over the last couple of months to get this right. One change that we did make since the last time I presented this contract to you is we did add an eligible use for the site. One thing that became really clear to the superintendent and I over the break is our schools become a community gathering point in case of an emergency, but our schools really are not well designed to meet that need, right? We were talking about meeting at Castano in case of flooding, but Castano is a site that floods significantly. The entrance floods significantly. The whole site's only, several inches above sea level. So we really need a place in East Palo Alto, and there really isn't one right now, for there to be a community fallback point in the case of natural disasters. And we know there's going to be more flooding, more smoke issues as the climate continues to change. And so we did add an eligible use for this site to serve as an evacuation point and do some of the design work, collaboration work with the city to make that a standard use, right? Not that it necessarily takes a lot, but you can do some smart design to make sure that if there is an emergency, this can be a place that's easily accessible by the community and can be a place of refuge if, for example, our schools are closed, or if, for example, schools are in session and we're trying to operate schools, or we still need a place during a smoke emergency for the community to go. This would be a place that would be able to meet that need during the school day. Lastly, just to reiterate the timeline here, if the board does choose to approve this agreement, this is not the last the board would weigh in here. So the next milestone is if the board approves this agreement, the design then comes back to the board. So the board would then have a chance to weigh in on specifically what the design is and really just confirm that the design of the space, one, meets the needs of the community, and two, fulfills the specific goals from a design perspective that are outlined in this agreement. At that point, the foundation would make a more detailed construction plan if the board chooses to approve that preliminary design. The foundation then does the more detailed out plan, which then, if it's aligned to the preliminary plan, would go to DSA and would be on our way towards constructing the building. And that concludes my sort of presentation, or second presentation, I should say, on the community hub.
Thank you, Mr. Eager. At this time, I will take any public comment from the floor regarding the contract with, or the agreement with the Sandhill Foundation for the development of the community hub. Do we have any public comment? Okay. Oh, okay. There's someone who raised their hand. If they don't. Yeah. We do have cards, but you can speak and then do the card afterward. There is there's going to be a 3-minute time limit. So sorry, we're 2-minute time limit. And we will have a timer for that.
How's it going?
Great. No, you do need to speak into the mic. Sorry, because there are people online watching.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is my first board meeting. So I've lived in East Palo Alto for 5 years. I'm a comprehensive public high school teacher in San Francisco. And the reason I'm here is I'm a neighbor to all this construction. I live in the backyard of the school. And during the pandemic, we took the fence down to do a bunch of remodeling, and I realized how close I was to the school. And I teach and I coach in the city. So I started teaching and coaching in my backyard because the city was closed. So my wife and I, we built a training center for the Tongan national weightlifting team. because we had a girl from Tonga go to the Olympics in weightlifting. And I read about the $30 million grant. And what I do at my school in San Francisco is I teach about 300 kids how to do Olympic weightlifting in my PE class and after school. And before the pandemic, we had a community partner agreement with the school district. So the public could come and train, and due to COVID, they shut all that. So the reason that that's somewhat important is it would be great for there to be space for Olympic weightlifting for not only 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in PE at the school, but also for the community. It's a great tool to train people for sports, but also to build community. And with all the adversity out there, it's really, really important to have one place where somebody could come and learn how to lift weights. I've been at my school for 20 years and I've taught 5,000 kids how to do Olympic weightlifting. And out of those 5,000 kids, we've had 2 Olympians, one for Team USA, one for Tonga. We've had 20 kids go to Junior Worlds and about 250 kids go to nationals. So
Thank you very much for your
sir.
comment.
I would love for that to be a part of the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, we will have discussion after. Yeah. And sorry, and what was your name? Kevin Doherty. Okay. Okay, great. Can you please fill out the card so we have your info as well? Thank you. It's in the back. I think something can show. All right. Any other comment before we move to the next? Okay. Okay. Yes, please come to the front. Yeah. Can you actually fill out the card and then hand it to Trustee Latu? Yeah. Yes, please. That would be helpful. Yeah. And just to those who are in the room with us, if you do want to make public comment, fill out the card and put the agenda item, and then you can pass it to us, the clerk at the front, which is Trustee Latu.
Good evening. My question is, what are the precautions that we're going to take towards this new community hub? Because I think the only fear that I have as a resident is that it's going to be another EPA center where none of our kids get to attend or use. So I would just like to know what we're going to put in place so that it's actually a community use. Oh, card now? That would be wonderful. Okay,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Trustee Latu.
So, yes, so right now I'll go ahead and open it up for the trustees to respond, make comment on this item.
Through the chair, just to highlight some of the things that were just said. This is very preliminary, so of course things are going to transition within the next couple of months to years as we decide what the next steps are. In regards to other organizations within the city, there are oftentimes a lot of red tape when it comes to certain organizations that aren't able to operate well. And so that's why we're looking at this lease to make sure and to ensure that there are checks and balances when it comes to this type of partnership, to ensure that the site will be utilized. And so that was just something I wanted to say. Kind of going back, as I wasn't at our previous meeting where we kind of discussed the community hub. I had a couple of questions for Will, but he's off screen.
I think Will can
Sorry,
I think he's
I'm here.
still
I
there.
can hear
Yes.
you.
Will, can you walk me down item 2.2, which is under Article 2 provisions relating to term? I see under 2.2, it says option to extend the term. Can you explain to me what this looks like?
Yeah, great question. This has definitely
2
been
minutes.
probably it's probably been the most negotiated section to some extent of the agreement. I know the board has a very strong preference for as short as possible terms. So there's an initial term of 30 years. Then there's on top of that 3 options to continue the lease. And these options are meant to be, and you can sort of see 2.3 talks about this, really moments of reflection and moments where there's a continued conversation about, is the agreement working in the way that it's intended to work? So if the lease is working the way it's intended to work, the tenant, the foundation, is able to extend or exercise that option, right? So we set up the moment of this. The reason it's not just a 60-year lease is because we did want to build in moments of reflection. Now, that doesn't mean that we can, if we don't like them or if there's sort of a bad will or something like that, we can just exercise the ability not to, force them not to exercise the option, right? So they do have the right, if they're living in the terms of this agreement, to exercise that option, right? But the reason that we have these options is, again, it's a moment to sort of force a conversation at that point. Although, as outlined in 2.4, we do have the ability, should the board want to bring them in every year to make sure that the space is actually being used the way that it's supposed to be used. I wasn't able to catch the name of the person who asked the question, but that is the goal of 2.4, is to make sure that we're still making sure that this space, which is meant to be for the community, thus the community hub name, is actually being used by the community, right? It is accessible, and is all these sort of protections that we put in are working.
Through the chair, when you say I'm reading the additional periods of 10 years each, does that mean that it is coming back to the board for an agreement of the extension, or the application of the extension, and then it just goes through?
There have to be a check-in opportunity first, which the board could make a public check-in, right? And then they would submit the request.
And the check-in would just be a meeting. Because I'm seeing in 2.3 that we agree to meet and to confer, but for me, I could check off saying we've met once, which is the quota, but I don't see any action items to follow up with that.
Yeah, it's not a, it is meant more of a public sort of feet to the fire kind of check-in. It is not they have to demonstrate A, B, C, and D. I think the board could deem a check-in sort of insufficient and require another one. If they just, but I don't think the goal of this is meant to be much more of a public accountability.
So the terms of extension aren't contingent to a board approval of these extensions?
No,
all right.
They are not. And that's something that we requested and tried to negotiate, but was not something that the partner was interested in.
So through the chair, just to be clear, that this could be a 60-year lease, because there are 3 options of 10 years to add on that we have no say in approval for, right? Because they can do it automatically as long as they do it by the certain, time of notice they got to give us. So this is really potentially a 60-year lease, and we can't say no to the extension. We can only have a check-in meeting to confer on how they are using the space. But we can't say no to the extension. Just want to be clear about that. We can't say no to the extension.
We can't say no to the extension if they are meeting the terms and the spirit of the agreement.
And through the chair, then because, there's something where it always says, what is the exact wording, as long as it's not deemed unreasonable, right? So even in like this review, which says no more than once a year, so we can only have 1 a year, this review. It sounds like you're saying we can say, if we don't agree with how it's being used, we can give feedback. I'm just looking for the guarantee that if there's a place where we disagree, that a change would be made. And I'm not seeing a guarantee here for us anywhere. I'm just seeing that we can have 1 meeting a year, but no guarantees about how to change things if we're disagreeing. And this can go on for 60 years.
We can, if they're sort of in breach of the contract, we have the ability under Article 9 defaulter remedies to enforce the lease, basically. So similar to if you were violating the terms of your lease with your landlord, you have the landlord has the ability to force you, eventually to compel you to address or remedy any issues, and otherwise you have to turn over the property.
Okay, through the chair, then I have a question about like what we then, so just to be clear, if there are extensions that are automatic, right? At the discretion of the tenant, for up to 60 years. So potentially 60-year lease, not just a 30-year lease. We can have no more than one checkpoint a year. And if we are, let's say, if we are in disagreement about how the space is being used, then we can go to, go to court or whatever this is here in Article 9, to talk about it. And so then I'm wondering, what then are the guarantees? So just to be clear about that, that's that. And then what are the guarantees for like how it should be used? Because I know there's language in here that we've been working to put into this lease, but it's still, the language still feels kind of fuzzy, and it feels like it's discretionary. So for example, it says you can have community events, right? You can serve the community, in that community you want to preference or prioritize Ravenswood and East Palo Alto, but prioritize doesn't mean require per se. So it just feels really fuzzy to me. And when I'm thinking about a 60-year lease for something that is supposed to have benefit to the Ravenswood City School District primarily, I'm trying to understand then why is it the agreement written more explicitly in terms where we could have more voice in times where it might get cloudy or we're in disagreement. That feels interesting. Yeah. And again, it just feels like a really long lease, 60 years for a school district. I know that if you're talking about commercial retail and people who are doing business and they're making money, we have, leases that are average 50 years or so, but those places like Stanford or Sobrato and Amazon, they're making money. The district has no way of making money other than through the use of our land in certain circumstances. That is our only way to make money, or we get donations from like the foundation rep. That is it. So I don't view this, if someone's going to say, oh, that's typical for commercial leases, this feels like, well, this is not a typical commercial industry that we're talking about. Also, and I want to be very careful because number one, I want to say I'm grateful and thankful for anyone who wants to invest in this community and in this district. So let's start there. That's where my heart is. I also want to be very clear, though, that I am a Ravenswood City School District School Board trustee. So I need to be thinking about the needs of students in this district and how we service them and how we can do that. And I know we have a need to enhance our programming, to change it, to meet the dynamic changes of economy and the world that we live in. And I'm trying to think, how do we use the resources we have to do that? And while this is, like you say, the largest donation that we have received in history, or one-time donation, I'm trying to think about the benefit to Sandhill versus the benefit to Ravenswood. And so maybe you can speak about that a bit. And so I know Sandhill, and I could be totally wrong, so excuse me and please correct me, but like Sandhill owns the land across from McDonald's on Bay Road. Yes, so I think there might be some requirement that there's like a community benefit requirement that they have and other developers have to invest in the community at a certain amount or a certain way. And then they also, I believe, get to, and I could be wrong, so please correct me, they could take the money they pay for a project and then use it as a write-off for development. That's what I'm saying. Correct me. I'm not up here trying to say something wrong, but that's my understanding of development in the city of East Palo Alto. So you think about what's the value that someone else might be getting versus what we're getting. So that's one thing I'm thinking about. Again, very thankful, but again, thinking about if we want to make a donation and investment in the progress and the success of this district, perhaps we should be protecting and truly investing in this district. And to me, some of this language feels like it's protecting other folks and not the district. But yeah, I'm gonna stop there for now.
Just to correct or address one comment, trustee, this is very explicitly not tied to Sandhill Properties, which is the for-profit arm. So there's no community benefit, there's no tax write-off for the for-profit aspect of Sandhill. This was actually intentionally timed outside of some of their existing projects because this was not meant to be construed as a community benefit. So your description of real estate is exactly right, mirrors mine at least. But this particular project has no relation to that type of community benefit or tax write-off. This is specifically a donation from the foundation, which is independent from the for-profit entity. So this is not just to clarify that particular point. This is not meant to be a community benefit, or there's no tax benefits that I'm aware of. It's just a charitable gift.
Okay, and then thank you for that. I would still want to know clearly, because there are other conversations with developers just going to city council meetings where it feels like they work through other nonprofits and things like that to get community benefit. So that's why I'm putting that on the table and saying, is that not the case here? So unless you're telling me 100% certainty that there would be, if it's not, then I'm gonna take it as maybe. So
I'd say 98% certain. I can try and send a text message and get to 100%.
Okay, and so is it true then that there is no guarantee in having prioritization for certain things for preference? There is no guarantee that they will be used for those things, or
I think what was just fundamentally very difficult in negotiating this lease is, as the trustees point out, 30 years at a minimum is a very long time, and anticipating every possible very valid use is difficult. And so we tried to instill a set of principles, and principles are fundamentally fuzzy, right? We didn't explicitly state, this particular basketball team is going to have access to the gym at this time, right? It's meant to be more, these are the groups these are the eligible uses, and these are the eligible groups listed by prioritization. And I don't want to maintain that that's foolproof, right? But I think that is the most robust approach that we have been able to find towards ensuring that there is a clear stated preference and eligible uses for the site. And so we have not seen this level of detail or level of preference in other leases. And so we do believe, and we are proud of this notion of prioritizing our community, but it is not ironclad, right? I mean, I think at some point there is a level where somebody from a different organization could be able to access the site. And we're just not able to restrict that to some extent.
To the chair, Will, like you said, absolutely. Like the tier system of intentionality, that's a major benefit. I agree with you. I think my main concern comes in the form of the term lease agreement, similar to how our other term lease agreements across the district have been dealt with over the last couple of years. And what I mean by that is, instead of it being a 30, 10, 10, 10 additional, in all clarity, it's more of a 60-year term. Yes.
It certainly could be.
Because when I see the 30, I see this is the threshold that we wanted our partners to stay at, but then there's the additional that I have concern on. And that's, do we need a community hub? Absolutely. Do I agree with the lineup of services? Absolutely. But the term lease agreement is the one that I'm stuck on. Because I would have thought of it a little bit more open had it been 60 right away. But when I see 30 with this additional, it's 60.
And the goal, I know, Trustee Lodger, I think not trying to be coy here and act like 30 plus 3 10s isn't 60, right? It is 60 that way, but we didn't want to do 60. We wanted to have these options for renewal because we do believe that they are a meaningful point of check-in, right? We do not necessarily view this as a just automatic shoot us an email and you got another 10 years. We do want them to be a point where the community comes together and talks about how the space is being used, not just in that annual public review, but really in a more thoughtful, deliberative way. And so we do have a whole section, dedicated to that, sort of what that focus should be. So I do totally agree that there is in many ways, this is a 60-year lease, but we do think of it differently because of that sort of intentionality around that renewal term.
Yes, but going back to my comment I made earlier with the checks and balances of what those check-ins will be with the additional for the 2.3, I'm talking about item 2.3. I see it as a discussion, but there's no way for us to be like, you're not, hypothetically speaking, everyone, you're not doing XYZ in a way that's really effective. What ways can we brainstorm and can you take away after that conversation is what I'm saying. I see a conversation, but I don't see the feedback of how you're going to take that feedback we give you and put it into action to ensure that the next following 10 years can address that issue.
Through the chair, there is an item under 4.2 under changes in permitted uses where it does require the board potentially require action. And so if the intent of how the community-based organization or the community hub is not being used as described, and as the public speaker also mentioned about the concerns if it is not used as intended to support Ravenswood community and the families in East Palo Alto, then I think it would align to 4.2 that it's actually the change in usage needs to be addressed and the board can take action on that to address it.
Through the chair, can you speak more about that? Because this says, so it's saying if the tenant desires to change, then if they need the prior written approval of the district, which shall not be unreasonably withheld or delayed. And so that term, that's the term I was looking for earlier, will not unreasonably withheld or delayed. And I was like, who determines what is reasonable or unreasonable? And so it's not just here, there's some other places as well. I think at the beginning where it says, we have use of the sports areas, during the school day, but Sandhill Properties can use those at their request and we can't deny it. Again, it can't be unreasonably withheld or delayed, the approval. And so I'm just like, who determines that? Again, it's this really fuzzy language. Because again, we might disagree, even, Trustee Alexander and I might disagree on if it's a change in the initial use intention or if it's the same. So who's judging what exactly? And I just don't feel comfortable. It feels very cloudy. I don't know. So yeah, muddy.
Through the chair, can I add on really quickly to what Trustee Shaboheen is saying there? That also says that the tenant desires to change the permitted uses. What if the tenant over the course of time slowly changes the permitted uses? About the frog in the hot pot, not realizing it's getting hotter. So I'm wondering if that, or is the frog in a blender? I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm just wondering, is that if the district is noticing that there's changes going on that Sandhill is doing that is negatively impacting our students, our district, and our community by whatever means, would we then have the power to say, hey, 4.2, they didn't ask to change anything? And then what does not following the spirit of, we know that this is fuzzy, but we know what the spirit is. What happens if Sandhill doesn't follow the spirit of what this is written in? And where is the district's recourse in addressing that?
we're similar to all of our agreements with all of our tenants. We have limited ability to unilaterally enforce anything, right? I mean, we can't just say you're in violation of this, you have to change, and they automatically change. So what happens technically is we would notify them that they're in breach of some aspect of the contract. They then have, I believe, 30 days to remedy that breach or have a clear plan for remedying that breach, right? And if they don't do that within that time frame, they have to turn the property over to us, right? And so that is a legal process.
Sorry, Will, you said if they don't remedy that, they
have 30 days. They have 30 days to address the breach.
and if they don't address the breach,
They'd have to turn the property over to us.
they have to turn the property over to us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so this
Thank
is 9.1 and 9.2. Now, in reality, I don't believe we've ever come close in any of our agreements to that issue. What generally happens is we say, hey, you're approaching frog and blender levels of violation. Can you fix it? And usually there's a conversation and people are able to work things out, right? So I don't want to set the expectation that if they're in breach of something, we're going to, 30 days and they're going to be out. It generally is much more of a negotiated process where the parties sort of confer in good faith to address the issue, which is just much more typical in our experience.
Through the chair. Could we get something in the language then that says, first strike, second strike, third strike, you lose the property and it comes back to us?
There's only one strike.
Okay.
They have one, if they're flagrantly violating this and they don't address the issue. So if they started running, I'm trying to think of an example of something. They started with indoor sports and physical education and ended up running a Barry's boot camp type thing, right? To use a slow change there. We could basically say, look, this Barry's boot camp, that is not indoor sports and physical education for young people. Like, you need to change it now. If they don't remedy that in 30 days, that's their one strike and they're out.
Through the chair, I heard
That's
you
in the
use,
contract.
is that in the contract? Trustee Alexander's asking what you just said?
Yeah, that's 9.1.
9.1.
9.1.
Okay, I'm thinking about something one of the speakers brought up, and they brought up the use of another building here and how there was an intention. And its accessibility today, some might see it's falling out of line with that intention. And so you use the word flagrant just now, like a flagrant redirect in how something's being used. But it doesn't have to be flagrant to be out of alignment with the initial intention. And that's what I'm trying to hedge against, or I'm trying to say, can we be extremely explicit about a recourse? Can we be extremely explicit about being on the same page? And I don't feel like it feels like I don't want you to be defending whoever this is, because you presented it as it was a donation and a gift. So it feels like folks would want to be in dialogue and conversation. I'm trying to understand why we would not want to have that type of protection here, so that the space that is a donation is being used in the intended ways for primarily or preferentially for Ravenswood City School District students. So I think we need to keep having that dialogue so that we don't end up with another situation like the one someone alluded to earlier, the speaker alluded to earlier. So that's first point. Now I have a question about transferability. I can't remember where I saw that in here. There's so many pages where it said like the lease could be transferred. They can assign the lease to someone else or another organization at any extension point or at any point, I believe. I'm not sure. And then I don't think that, could you clarify whether we can, what our part is, our role is in that, that transfer of the lease? And then that's part one. And then number two, I have a question. Can they sublease this place? Meaning, can they rent out rooms for revenue? Just wondering. Is that the transferability?
All right, definitely a lot to unpack there. Let me just take these in turn. And I think Trustee Bomehin, I on the first point, which I think Trustee Latu's also sort of directly alluded to. What is our recourse? I guess the question is, if we believe that they are underusing this site in some capacity, they could be doing better, right? Is that sort of sufficient for us to argue they're in breach of this agreement and eventually take control of the site back? And I think unfortunately there's not a good way for us to do that, just because mismanagement is a little bit in the eye of the beholder, right? I think there are certain sites, not to pick on anyone in East Palo Alto, but certain sites that I've seen in prior experience that are, I believe, well used, and somebody else thinks are not well used. And I think that the donation here, the intent is very good. And I think that they don't want someone, perhaps from our board, to basically say, yeah, we don't like the way you're using it, and then just sort of seize control and use false pretenses to basically seize control of the site. So just as I think we're nervous that somebody might do something to misuse the site, I think they're nervous that we might just capriciously basically reclaim the site by arguing mismanagement. And so it's very difficult contractually to basically put something like that in, just because it is a little bit in the eye of the beholder here. The transferability, I think your second question there, I believe is Article 8 assignment, which is they have the ability to potentially transfer this to another organization. And really what that's meant is another organization that's similar, right? Now, really, this is if the Sandhill Foundation becomes the True Blue Foundation, right? That in that case, the intent is really just more of a rebranding or something of that nature, not necessarily a usage change. Because we are so strongly protected in the specific uses of this site, we're not necessarily overly concerned with this, although we do have some protections. We certainly need to be noticed of what the thing is, who the person is, and then if we do want to disapprove it, we actually can. Our only obligation is just to state our reasons for its disapproval. So, the thought is if it's rebranding something, we don't necessarily, it would be unreasonable for us to say, hey, this is just rebranding the organization. You can't do that. That would be unreasonable. But if it was, they're transferring it from the Sandhill Foundation to the Donald J. Trump Foundation, we could basically withhold that because we think that organization is not aligned with the district values.
Through the chair, but just to be clear, that language is there again.
I was trying to give a specific
Prior
example of what would be
approval
unreasonable
shall
and what
not
would
be
not be unreasonable.
unreasonably withheld. So again, it's like, it's a little muddy again. What's unreasonable?
Yeah, and there is sort of a lot of legal precedent on what is unreasonable, and the bar is fairly high to be deemed unreasonable, right? So this is not sort of uncommon, but it would be, they're just changing the name of the organization, and we're just saying no, we don't want to do that. That might be deemed unreasonable. But if we just disagreed with the mission of the new organization, that would in no way be close to unreasonable.
Through the chair, unless somebody else has a question, I have a question just about the preference of, it says in what's this section 4.3, I believe. Yes, see, I'm thinking about community use, and it talks about when space is made available, the following tiered preference will be used. Number 1, the East Palo Alto Faith Community. Number 2, Ravenswood City School District. Who is the East Palo Alto Faith Community explicitly? And that's 4.4. And so some of these aren't necessarily in East Palo Alto. Like I was looking at Crazy Love Foundation, and I don't think that's based in East Palo Alto. So just wondering about, so then these groups explicitly in 4.4 would get preference over Ravenswood City School District staff and students when there is space, just making sure I'm reading that correctly.
And this you are, and this is the spaces that are outside of the school day, right? So during the school day, and then not during, for example, other specific district uses such as board meetings, or some of our regular community events, basketball practices, things like that. All of those would be times where we get access. So outside of all of that, this is the community use preference. The East Palo Alto Faith Community is not a defined group. I don't think 4.4, that's a little bit more of the proposed group of organizations to help determine how this is managed. This is not necessarily defined as the East Palo Alto Faith Community.
So through the chair, the East Palo Alto Interfaith Committee is made up of a group of churches. They've been meeting since, I believe, the early 2000s. And so when I hear the interfaith, I think of the core group of pastors that meet within East Palo Alto to discuss community outreach, benefit, and stuff like that.
And so it also, through the chair, says includes these groups. It doesn't mean that it is restricted to these groups. So whatever this community is, these groups are included, but it's not an exhaustive list per se. Included but not limited to. Included but not limited to. And so, okay.
Through the chair, may I clarify too in terms of use? So under 4.3, there's also the description of how the district has the 10 designated opportunities to be able to utilize the facility based on our need, to include also, like, for example, the 8th grade promotion.
Yeah, through the chair, I feel like there's some explicit things, like it says you can use the sports center like through till 3 p.m. on school days, with also them sometimes saying, by them, I mean the tenant, saying we want to use it, which we can't deny unreasonably. I think it's set up to 10 times perhaps during the school day, but anytime at post 3:30 every day and through the weekends, then we cannot use that. I think it allowed up to 10 times, 10 events per year. That was the max per their approval. And so I'm saying for the gym, and then that's specifically for the gym. And then for the other areas, again, we would still need to be approved by the tenant. And then here's the preference list that's here, and we are second.
Yeah, so after the school day, after our explicit uses in 4.2, in those cases, and one of the challenges we've had is thinking of times where we'd want to use this space besides the sort of specifically listed uses and then an additional 10 uses. You know, in those examples, we're second on the list of preferences. So we weren't able to come up with a lot of times outside of those uses where we might want it, and certainly not more than 10. So even though I know we are sort of second on this list, which I think symbolically is not ideal, I do think from a practical perspective, I don't know that there's going to be a lot of examples where we would be requesting the space and not able to use it, right? Because we have those guaranteed uses throughout 4.2.
So
4.3, excuse me.
So from what I'm hearing, based on all the comments, is that we want to make sure that this space is for the community of our school district, Ravenswood City School District, that every single event that happens here benefits our community and is inclusive of our whole community. I know that those were some of my initial questions as well when we first looked at this lease. And I think that's why there is the check-in opportunity. And this lease is very descriptive on what those opportunities are. I also want to say that it is for up to 10 events, but then we can still ask for more than 10. And that this is beyond, like, this is outside of, like, our every board meeting does not count for those 10. Board meetings are included no matter what. Basketball practices are included no matter what. Basketball games are included no matter what. So this is not for, that's not the 10 that we're asking for. This is outside of those events. We have 10. I just want to clarify that's correct.
That is exactly correct.
And then if for some reason, you know, to go back to Trustee Alexander's, maybe not say the example, but that this lease is supposed to be something that we can go back to, and every board and every reiteration of this board can go back to say, these were the intentional uses for this community hub. It was for the community of the Ravenswood City School District, and people and students from our community should be able to access it. And we in good faith said yes to you for this reason. And now if that is not happening, then we have a reason to go to 9.2. Is that right? I don't remember what the number was, to terminate, because they are no
That's
longer
correct.
9.2, because they are no longer doing what they said they were going to do in the lease, right? And then we also have the check-in opportunity for us as a board and every iteration of the board to ask yearly, how has this space been used? How are community members being able to use and access this space, right? That was something that I also wanted to make sure, right? That people in our community feel like they have a space to come say to people who can make decisions about this space. You guys said that this space was for our community, and it is not for our community. I've tried to ask for this space 10 times and they keep ignoring me, right? I have a group of 25 kids from East Palo Alto, from Ravenswood City School District, who want to use this space on Saturday, and they are not able to use this space. We have a forum for them to come and speak about that, right? That's what the check-in opportunity is. And if they speak on that, and then we see, like, you guys are not using the space, you need to show us every single time that these 10 people came to ask, or 10 times they came to ask for this space, the foundation needs to let us know, well, this was the organization that was using it instead. And this is how we benefited the Ravenswood City School District students, right? And if they can't show us that, then we have every reason to go to 9.2. I just want to make that clear. Am I correct on that? So I feel like my questions have been answered and my concerns have been answered. I want to agree, and we are going to vote. So everybody, okay, go ahead, Trustee Alexander.
Through the chair, just one thing that I think would make some of us more comfortable. In that list of 4.3C, where the first preference is given to the East Palo Alto faith community and the second preference is given to the district, I think it would make people more comfortable, us as trustees and the district in general, if we were the first priority and the faith communities were the second priority. I would feel much more comfortable with that, making sure that it is first and foremost benefiting the school district and the school community right here. Nothing against faith communities. They get number 2.
Through the chair, I'm curious though, because during the regular school day, it's all accessible to Ravenswood City School District. In addition to any other events that we have that's part of and affiliated with the regular school day, including some after school programs when it comes to the athletic programs, including the 10 events and potential requests for additional. So it potentially could exhaust the need of the district, but I understand the request, but it is already embedded in the language in regards to us utilizing the facility on a regular day basis during regular time when staff is present.
So to respond to that,
Yeah.
to the chair, just really quickly, in conversation, the thought is, what if a Los Robles Ronald McNair wanted to have some kind of a performance fundraiser and they wanted to use that space, and they're told, nope, sorry, you have second priority. First priority, they wanted to have services. That's the situation I'm thinking of. So it's not one of those 10 scheduled things. It's not sports. It's not regularly scheduled programs. It's a group of the school district wanting to use the space and being told no because somebody else already has it. It would make me feel a lot more comfortable this way.
Through the chair, I agree. That's where I am also. I agree with trustee Alexander, because with that logic of superintendent, it feels like we wouldn't need to be on this list at all. If we were going with what you're saying, we wouldn't even be at number 2. So I would feel a lot more comfortable if we're saying that's what the priority is and the preference is. I would feel comfortable within switching the order and putting Ravenswood City School District first. I don't understand why it's not first, if that's what it's for, that you keep saying. So then I would want to go back and talk about that in this contract, and I would feel a lot more comfortable. But even on top of that, I'm still uncomfortable with me personally, and I know we'll vote. I'm uncomfortable with automatic leases. You can check my record. I've been here for 4 years plus, and I'm never comfortable with automatic renewals of leases. And right now we have automatic renewals for 60 years. And we keep saying 30, but it is up to 60. And we have no guarantee to say no, none, 0. Even with our 1 meeting a year, where we're allowed to express concerns, we have nothing that says no. Even with concerns, even if things like blatant, the only out you're giving me is we can go to court, which now costs money. That's literally it. It's a conversation in a board meeting 1 time a year, and we can go to court. And that's for 60 years. So for me, I don't necessarily feel comfortable with this. The automatic renewal, no guarantee for change at the check-in points. And then again, why Ravenswood isn't in the number 1 position here, if it's for the students of Ravenswood City School District. So that's my vote. So it would be a no as is right now, just so we know.
Through the chair, I think rereading back to item C, I think, so I get now what Superintendent Sudari was saying when it says community use. So this is outside the intentional hours, right? And so I absolutely hear what my fellow trustees are saying with the want of it being reversed. But then also I'm trying to think of what the purpose of the community hub is in general. Because as we are directly talking as trustees over our school district, and of course, our top priority is going to be our school district. It's also interesting to also think that we do want, well, I as a trustee would like to have our community more engaged with our spaces and have the ability, because right now I'll tell you, it's really hard to find spaces within East Palo Alto for a church group or a nonprofit to use outside of the available spaces, if I'm going to be quite honest. So I get that point. I am absolutely in support of opening our campuses. I think Superintendent Sudaria and I've talked profusely about the need to building a better relationship and not closing off our campuses, because I believe that our campuses should also benefit every child within East Palo Alto. With that being said, my main concerns are over items 2.2 and 2.3 and 2.4. So I'm not saying no. I will abstain if the language is as is, though. But aside from that, I absolutely love the idea of a community hub and having people have access to this state-of-the-art facility and having alternative styles of things that we can do and offer that'll benefit more people. Yes, thank you, Chair.
So, Vice President Nunez, would you like to say anything?
Through the chair, I'm just wondering if this lease, I'm sorry. If this lease isn't approved here, what happens then? Like, would we take our concerns back to the table to renegotiate a new lease agreement?
We certainly could. It's a little bit up to the direction of the trustees. I do hear some areas that we could try to renegotiate. I would highlight, to trustees of Obedience point, these are areas that I think the board has been very consistent in giving feedback on. And so these were everything that's sort of been listed, whether it's the sort of ordering there or the specific aspects of the term. You know, we've done everything that we could in the negotiations, as far as I can tell, to try and push those points. So I don't know that we're going to be able to get a lot more wiggle room just to set expectations. You know, so as a donation, these are sort of the you know, last best and final terms, but certainly the board could direct me to go back to the table to see if I can get a better deal. That has certainly happened in the past, and we have been lucky in the past in getting sort of better terms.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other comments, this is an action item, so I'm gonna go ahead and take a vote. So all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
And I guess the other three are abstaining. Do I need?
Usually
have to
you
say,
announce.
don't
Okay,
you?
so there is one yay from President Bloom, one nay from trustee Chabot-Mahine, and three abstaining from Vice President Nunez, trustee Latu, and trustee Alexander. So this motion does not pass. Thank you.
Do we give direction to Will or to the superintendent?
May I clarify, then the direction is to take what we've heard from the trustees today and we go back and meet up with Sandhill Foundation.
So I don't know if Mr. Eager heard that, but the direction was to go back to renegotiate some of these things to see if it still is applicable. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next point, which is item C, consideration to approve the contract with SVA for the redesign of the CCRMS parking lot.
All right, I'm going to try and go through a couple of other things reasonably quickly. So I'm going to bundle these two next issues, if that's okay with the board, just to keep things moving. We're proposing making a couple of somewhat significant changes to the existing CCRMS plan. So these are things that were not included in the initial scope, but we believe at this point are necessary. Now, we made a whole bunch of sort of smaller modifications, but these are bigger things that I just wanted to flag for the board. The good news is the project right now is currently still under its initial budget. And we believe that even with these two changes, the overall project will finish on budget. So we are recommending proceeding with these changes. But again, they're larger amounts. We just wanted to call some attention to them. The first is, and those trustees who've been able to see the construction site will know that the parking lot, which was not in particularly good shape when we began the project, is now close to unusable. And so we're proposing lime treating it, basically rebuilding the entire foundation of the parking lot, restriping it, and installing solar panels, as well as some EV charging. So we're proposing that here, highlighted in yellow. The second is the courtyards between the wings, when it rains, often overflow and have significant flooding. So we're proposing basically making those, completing a drainage plan for those portions of it, and then putting in artificial grass, some nicer seating areas and some pavers, and make them feel like real sort of nice areas to sit and relax in between classes or in recess. And those are the two areas highlighted here in red. So we're asking the board to approve those two changes. The second thing that I just wanted to highlight here, excuse me. I think that the trustees know this, but when it rains, and this isn't even particularly egregious, when it rains, it floods on this site reliably. You can see there's just tons of standing water, and the reason for that is that there is absolutely no thought put into the overall site-wide drainage plan. What we've basically relied on, this is the overall aerial view of the site, is the back area here just absorbing all of the water. And oftentimes, because of the type of soil we have on the site, that just means standing water in the back of the school for long periods of time. We do expect with climate change for more frequent, very large rainstorms. And that's kind of what we saw over this past January, where again, the site just had large amounts of standing water. So we're proposing a lot of changes to the back, and we're proposing adding a lot of hardscape. So this is going to be surfaces like quality tennis courts or a quality courtyard or a quality turf field, where the site will not drain or will not absorb any water in the same way that it has in the past. So because this is now usable surface, it's not going to drain as well. So we're proposing putting in an actual stormwater retention basin under the surface to help absorb some of that water. This is a bit unusual for sort of our district, but we believe it makes a lot of sense given the sort of intended use of the site and the lack of an overall drainage plan there. We also just think it sort of makes sense to do this as part of this overall project to really address the overall stormwater runoff plan. The other thing that we're asking the trustees to vote on is to finalize the design and sort of start moving that to DSA for the Magical Bridge piece. And again, this is the same design that we presented at the last board meeting. We're very excited about this. Really wonderful vision with the goal of really getting that highlighted in red area open at the start of next school year. So here's just, again, the overall plan for this. We got the field, the tennis courts and classrooms, the core courtyard and athletic space, and then addressing the overall site-wide drainage issue. You'll note that the first three lines the district is not, quote unquote, on the hook for, but the last line the district is on the hook for. So three things we're asking you to vote on here to approve. One is the contract to redo the parking lot. The second is the contract to redo the drainage. And the third is the overall Magical Bridge design work, which also includes a lot of the site-wide drainage issue. And the reason that we're bundling those together is because doing the sort of landscape work, the field drainage, and the overall site-wide drainage just needs to be bundled. One caveat is we are going to, as we sort of learn more and more and more about exactly what the design work will be, there will be an amendment, and we're anticipating an amendment on the site-wide drainage issue. So a little bit of an estimate now. As we dig in more to the design work, we'll get more specific there. So a couple big changes we're proposing on the site, all of which I think makes sense, and all of which is accounted for with the addition of the site-wide drainage issue, which we would draw from new bond funds to help cover the cost of. So that concludes the presentation.
If you have a comment, you can use the comment card again to write in which item you have a question on. Okay, so if you would like to speak, you can put item C and then we can call you up and put a time. Yeah. Sorry, Will, can you pull up the map again, please? I think you can add it to your original card.
Sorry, this map,
The other map? This,
the drainage map.
The previous slide, Will? Oh, the other way. Oh.
Oh, you're there. You're on the call bars.
I'm that's the reason.
Oh, no, you're on.
That's the reason the parking.
O'Brien?
You'll see.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious where they're gonna put, I think it's a great idea that there's drainage there. But like, how close will the property?
So that area is nice. I'm not wrong.
he doesn't live on Romar. He lives on by the O'Brien.
Parking lot.
That's
Yes.
the part that's not the property. So there's a row of trees, so if I'm envisioning it correctly, they're gonna go
Sorry, can you come to the mic? Just for the people who, because Will is on Zoom. Thank you. So we can start the timer so you can ask your question. Sorry. Okay, so he's gonna start. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, I'm glad I didn't leave. I'm just wondering where you guys are gonna, I think it's a great idea that you're building some type of drainage system to maybe hopefully even catch some of the runoff. And if I'm thinking about it, it's hard with all the different maps. Are you gonna build the stormwater drain? There's 3 or 4 big homes that are there. One of them is mine. And there's a bunch of trees. So I don't know if you're adding to that tree canopy in terms of like putting the drain there and then doing trees around there, because that's kind of the buffer between the water and our property. And that's the only reason it's not flooding. So if I'm just curious of where that drain pipe is going to be. And if you're thinking about like, I know there's artificial turf, but there's a ton of room to plant more trees. And if there's one thing that saved our cul-de-sac from the last, torrential atmospheric river is I think there's about 30 trees that 3 neighbors share. So I'm not too clear on the geography, but I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, the goal, big picture, is to keep all of as much as we can of the stormwater on the site and treat it on the site. So we're putting in not just trees around the perimeter and potentially adding, there are some existing trees. You have to figure out the exact number, but I do believe the plan here is to add trees. But you can't quite see it here, but some of these areas as well include, an additional bioretention basin. So we do want to have more places for water to responsibly pool and then percolate down, in addition to some of the drainage. Now, I don't know where exactly some of the specific pipes are going to be going. I think that's kind of the next phase of specific design work, of really sort of engineering that aspect with the overall field. But again, the spirit of this is to keep as much of the water on site and retain it and treat it on site as possible, so that it's not sort of causing any issues with any of our neighbors.
Okay, thank you. Once you figure out where those big storm drains are going to be, I'd love to know.
We'll be here.
I think it's a great idea, as long as it's, there's a space between the property line,
yeah,
and that we use the existing trees to kind of help with that, since the parking lot does get wet.
That's definitely our goal, is to reduce the amount of just flooding we have off the site and on the site.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the trustees or from the floor? Yes, trustee Chabot-Maheen.
Thank you. So, thank you, President Ravenswood. So we have a consideration to approve, and I'm just wondering, per the speaker's question about what was what, this is approving that we move ahead without knowing where things are, right? Just want to make sure.
This is approving the design contracts, but I can answer exactly where things will be.
Okay.
It is to approve the contract to create the design for us to know exactly where things are. Is this correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
So instead of 3 things we're approving 2.
We're approving 2 things. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take a vote.
Through the chair. Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve item 4C.
I second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, the motion passes 5-0. I will consider a motion to approve item 4D, the consideration to approve contract.
Through the chair, I move to approve item number D, consideration to approve contract with SVA and the Magical Bridge Foundation site design.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
Thank you. So I will take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, the motion moves 5-0, passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Eager. I think that, wait, no, you're not done yet. All right, let's go to the Bellhaven plan and construction timeline.
Oh, with all due respect, Madam President, we are just getting started. On to Bellhaven. So Bellhaven, just want to highlight sort of where we are, big picture. So the board, I believe in one of the December meetings, approved the overall preliminary design, and now we're really just doubling down on engagement with the community. So we have a publicly available website. It's got events, details, design information. We're sending a citywide mailer later this month. I personally dropped off a copy of the mailer just to the immediate neighbors before break to let them know about some of the work we were doing with solar panels, as well as the overall site plan. We've got 2 meetings with the Menlo Parks Commission, which is a little bit of a mouthful there, over the next 6 months. And I'm doing office hours on site for members of the public, for staff, every 3 weeks. So we're doing a lot of engagement. We're also, talking about this obviously with school site council and other folks. So trying to get the word out, please help us do so, but trying to get the work out. And then on the design side, we're deep in the weeds of, what does the art classroom look like, right? What exactly is the layout of each of the rooms? And really trying to get sort of into the levels of specifics on some of these questions. So we really know, the details here. The big question at this point is really how do we sort of design the classrooms and the new gym at the site? That's sort of what we're trying to figure out here. And I think, Blaine Yoder and Chris Bradley, Chris, as many of you know, is our architect. Blaine is with Teleq. He's really been instrumental in helping us think about, how do we go about doing this? And the construction folks, their preference is always take everybody off the site, move them somewhere else, and then we have the site to ourselves, and we can do as much construction as fast as possible. As we've done at the middle school, we've done more of a phased approach where we, clear out a wing, work on that wing, move everybody into that wing, clear out another wing, move everybody into that wing when that wing's done, and sort of continue to make sort of one of those sliding puzzle pieces, right? Where you're constantly moving folks into different spaces. So I'm going to kind of outline those 2 approaches. The goal today is not to have a vote in any way. We're not seeking direction formally. What we're asking for is feedback and trying to get a sense as to whether or not the board has a preference or not. We're then going to meet as a leadership team with the site, get more feedback on these different approaches, because they do have big implications site-wide, and then come back to the board with a formal recommendation. So this is really sort of part 1 of 2, just exploring some of the different options here. So walking through them quickly, here's what a phased approach might look like. So this summer, what we're proposing is setting up interim housing. Those are those yellow boxes here. We're proposing moving folks into temporary housing, even though we wouldn't begin construction until January, because we don't want folks to move during the school year. So we're proposing moving people and then kind of keeping the buildings kind of there for, between sort of August and December. Then we're proposing basically shutting down this area in red. So shutting down the core parts of those wings, and really going as fast as we can on modernization for those wings. It would probably take us about a year to get things close to done in terms of modernizing these purple wings. Then what we would do as kind of phase 2 is fence off, again, areas in red. So we close off these 6 classrooms, and we keep closed off this area here. Folks could then move into these modernized classrooms, and we probably wouldn't need interim housing. So folks could actually move out of interim housing earlier in this option. And then at some point during the summer, we'd finish the blacktop and this area. Folks would then be able to move into this area, probably winter of 2025, and into the new gym, which is going to take a long time to build because we're starting last. We're starting the demolition of this space and the construction of this space last, right? That's not going to happen for 18 months after that. So probably the June 26th, so the 26-27 school year, that space in the field would come available. So just to kind of summarize this, fewer classrooms, call it 10 or so, move into temporary housing. The 2 main wings are shut down. The 2 wings are modernized from January to January and then open for occupancy. The blacktop would be done that summer or the summer after, 26 or so. And then the rest of the campus would run through summer 26. So the whole construction would be about 2.5 years or so. So that's kind of option 1, that phased approach. The second approach is more temporary classrooms and more of the campus shut down. So you can see in red now, we've actually included this second area as to be sort of closed off. And because we're closing off those classrooms and not using those classrooms, we do need more temporary classrooms. Now, the good news to that is because we're starting on this earlier, we're going to finish this earlier. The bad news is because we're sort of finishing this earlier, these classrooms are going to take a little bit longer just because we're doing more work at one time. The nice thing about this is we sort of close this all off and then we're able to open this all at once. So the whole school would kind of come open at once, and then we would work on the blacktop in the field after that. And so these areas would come online the summer of 25. So for the 25-26 school year, they'd come online. So one nice thing about that is they're sort of moving during the summer instead of during the school year. Here's sort of the difference, right? Phase 1 is you kind of close this off. This area stays closed a little bit longer, but you got to move into these classrooms a little bit sooner, and fewer people are in temporary housing. The second approach, more people in temporary housing, but slightly earlier, the entire campus opening up. One other thing I would just call attention to, and I don't know if this is necessarily a deciding factor. Remember, this is a $50 million project, but there are material savings by finishing earlier because we don't have to pay for that inflation cost of sort of a longer term construction, right? So that's kind of where we're at in terms of this. And the big difference again is the wings are finished a little bit later, but sort of opening in the summer. But the gym is finishing a full year earlier because we're starting the gym at the get-go instead of starting the gym, really after those classrooms open up. There's a whole lot of information. I have Blaine here just in case my COVID brain messed anything up, just to answer any questions. But again, goal now is just for feedback on these 2 approaches. If the trustees have a lean one way or another.
So I guess we're opening it up for any questions or comments.
Through the chair. Hey, Will, could you go back a couple slides? So, yes, that one. Phase 2B, new gym. No, go forward. For the whole school closure. Okay, so in that one, where it says phase 2, in there, that whole thing will get modernized, right? All at once. And the kids are on the blacktop, where that playground is, and so they'll have the blacktop to play on. Now, if you go to the next slide, where do they play during this phase?
We'll do this over the summer.
I'm sorry?
This will be done over the summer. We'll do this when school's not in session.
Thank you.
When you say temporary housing for teachers, are those the portables? Where are they coming from? Are they going to be moved on and off?
Yeah, we can rent temporary classrooms that are kind of very similar, frankly, to the portables that we installed, but obviously much nicer and much newer. So they'll actually be, I think, in many cases, upgrades. and then we would move them out. So there's significant costs associated with installing them, and then they're relatively cheap month to month, but they would just be similar to a standalone modular classroom or portable classroom.
And with either one of these options, the temporary classrooms is the same number of years, correct?
Not quite. So the temporary classrooms, in both cases, we would start in August 2023. But in this approach, they'd open up January 25, so it'd be about a year and a half in temporary classrooms. Whereas in this approach, it would be about 2 years in temporary classrooms. So when we shut down the whole campus, because there's just more construction work to do, it's going to take us a little bit longer to open everything. So people would be in temporary classrooms for a little bit longer, 6 months longer. The advantage of that, to some extent, though, is you wouldn't be moving during the school year. It's a little bit paradoxical. The whole campus construction is faster, but the temporary housing period is actually slightly longer.
Okay. Yes.
Through the chair?
Yes.
Are you gonna ask something?
Yes, you can ask.
Okay, thank you. Have we asked Bellhaven staff?
That was the
Which
same
they would
question.
prefer?
Same question.
Which they,
As a teacher, I know what my preference would be, but I don't teach Bellhaven anymore.
Right,
Yeah.
through the, Will is
The
going, yeah, go ahead, Will.
The goal was to do that last week, but one of us got COVID and has been a little bit MIA. So the sequencing is a little bit off here, but the next step is to ask Bellhaven staff and families if they have a preference. And then we'll bring this back to the board for a formal recommendation. But I was just curious if the board had a strong preference for one of these versus the other.
To the chair. My personal opinion would be to hear from staff and the community. I feel like that will sway my personal conviction way more, hearing from the people who will have to deal with this on the regular rather than me as a board member. So I think my personal preference was to hear what they have to say, and then make a more formal decision after. We do have a board meeting next week, so I just wanted to flag that for everyone.
Yeah, I would also agree. I was going to ask the same question of have we asked the community, have we asked the teachers, have we asked the staff? Because I think that is really important to see what they would want for their campus in their area. So any other comments or questions? Will, do you have any questions for us other than what we've said?
Trustee Alexander indicated a lead. I'd be curious if she's comfortable sharing that. Otherwise, no more questions for me.
He said,
I think he's saying,
sorry.
I think what you were saying to me just a minute ago about asking teachers. Okay.
Wait,
He actually thought if you had an opinion, if you were ready to share that, we thought maybe you already had an idea of what direction you wanted to.
Through the chair, my initial thought, having seen this done other places, is get the whole thing done at once. And as a teacher, I'd rather not move mid-year. So I'd rather be in a portable for 2 full school years rather than 1.5 school years. But like I said, my opinion doesn't really matter. It's the opinion of the people working on that campus that matter right now. As long as it gets done is what I want. Thank you.
yes.
Through the chair. I just had a question about, I know that all 5 is on that campus, and will they be affected by this construction? Because they're on their own thing. Got it. Thank you. It closed off. Okay, thank you.
Not directly. To be transparent, the construction is disruptive and it will impact, I think, the overall community, the surrounding neighbors, and all 5 is obviously a neighbor. So there will be noise from construction, but we don't anticipate this impacting all five's operations in any way.
Thank you. I think you have your direction. So now we'll move on to item number 6. Los Robles Ronald McNair construction overview.
All right, still me. When we initially outlined our bond, and this is just a screenshot of the bond plan that we had, Los Robles was last. And the reason for that is the school is in the best shape out of our 3 schools. That is not to say that it is in excellent shape. It is just in the best shape. And so we had proposed doing Belhaven, then Castaño, then Los Robles. The challenge with doing Los Robles has always been not the design. The design of the school relative to Belhaven or Castaño really makes sense. It's a very logical design in my mind. It's a safe campus. It's a nice, welcoming, warm space. The problem is, how do you actually do construction on the site? You can't, for example, phase the construction the way we would at Belhaven, where you do one side then the other. The site's just too small. The noise would be, frankly, unbearable. And there's not really sufficient space on the site to have temporary classrooms. We could put them on the field over south of the school. The issue with that is we are hoping to, at some point, improve that field. And so there is sort of an issue here. So kind of that's been in the back of my mind. Independently, the lease at Izzy, which is an early childhood provider in the area, in the site of the former Ravenswood Child Development Center, their lease has come up. And so in the lease conversations with them, it emerged that they're currently using 2 of the 12 classrooms. They've had some difficulties sort of restaffing and seeing enrollment rise after the pandemic. It occurred to me that we could actually, it sort of presents a fairly unique and I think very compelling opportunity. We could move Los Robles Ronald McNair into the 12 classrooms at Izzy. That has a parking lot, relatively light retrofit for the site, very close, obviously, for families. They wouldn't necessarily notice a huge disruption. Students could continue to use the gym or the multi-purpose room, potentially even access that site for lunch, use the field, use the blacktop. And so take this moment where we have nearby reusable space and move Los Robles in there, renovate Los Robles. We think we could do it within a year, one school year. And then potentially, should the board choose to, move Izzy back in. So here's kind of what that plan would look like. We think we could do the modernization for the school in 14 months. So basically, the last day of school, the team is already lined up. The contractors, the supplies, teachers and staff move out. Students move out. We start construction, we hustle, and we're ready to go the following school year in August. We believe that we could make it, but it depends a little bit on getting our design in order. We have enough time now, but it could be tight. And so what we're proposing is if we can't hit 1 June, namely starting in June of 24, if we can't hit that deadline, then we punt it to June of 2025. So keep the same design, keep all the same work. It's not wasted work in any way. We just delay 1 year so that we don't force folks to move outside of the year. The sort of big reasons for that are, one, we have an opportunity right now with swing space. So I'm not trying to make an argument that Los Robles is now in desperate need of renovation. They're not. But we have a unique opportunity to move faster in a way that's less disruptive to the kids in the campus. 2, the site's not great. And so getting kids in better spaces faster with functioning ventilation system, better windows, acoustics that work, that's great. And then 3rd, and again, this isn't the I think primary reasons, but I think this is a substantial reason to do this, is construction inflation is high right now. And so doing this now, instead of in say 5 years when everything else is done, will make this project effectively 30% cheaper. So we'd initially envisioned this as a $25 million project. Perhaps this is actually going to be closer to like a $15 million project, which frees up $10 million for something else. Now, I want to be clear, this is disruptive to Izzy. They are not as large as they, I think, will be someday if they move back into that space. So we're not disrupting 12 classrooms, but we are disrupting 2 classrooms. What I'm proposing from a lease perspective is we know it's going to take us a year to get ready. So let's have a 1-year guaranteed lease, and then the district would have 2 1-year options. So if we're ready to go, great. They're out after 1 year. If they're not ready to go, then they're out after the 2nd year. So we exercise that option. And in that time, we're exploring, can we find a way to minimize the disruption, because we know how important early childhood is, of moving Izzy to another site. The most promising site we believe is Castaño. Castaño is currently the only site without an early childhood pipeline. So I've been proud to do this over the last couple of years, but we have all 5 at Belhaven. We have family connections at Los Robles, but Castaño does not have an early childhood site. So moving Izzy there would actually ensure that all of our school sites have an early childhood provider. So what we're asking for tonight from the board is basically 3 things. 1, direction to accelerate this move. 2, to approve a ground lease extension with Izzy that keeps the existing term of the lease in place, but just sort of instills a couple of 1-year options. And then 3, to approve the design contract with SVA to finish the Los Robles design. I would note we did meet with the instructional staff at Los Robles, as well as some of the other staff. They were in favor of proceeding with this approach. They thought that it made sense to accelerate the renovations because of the unique opportunity of swing space as sort of a way to minimize disruption. So unlike with Belhaven, where I haven't had a chance to run that by staff, we did run that by staff at Los Robles, and they are recommending that we proceed with this approach. That'll conclude my presentation.
Any comments or questions?
Through the chair, lots of moving pieces involving our school sites. And so I think this one, it fits, what we're trying to do in this time crunch. But I also want to make sure that as quickly as we are making decisions and moving forward towards a lot of these constructions, we're also doing the due diligence of updating our community on what we're doing across each school site. So if this does get passed, I think as a district, we need to compile what these timelines are going to be looking like through 2026, and creating some type of imagery or update or formal press release to really acknowledge these big changes, and also ask our community, to be just being thoughtful about, how it's going to affect our surrounding neighbors as well. So that's my only point, is just making sure that we're super clear in what we're doing timeline wise, and that the community knows where we are in that timeline.
Yes.
Through the chair.
Yes, Trustee Alexander.
I'm really excited. I mean, that for years, Ravenswood did nothing with its facilities. Years and years. And I am so excited by all the incredible happenings at every single one of our school sites that's going to be coming to fruition within 5 years. So just wanted to say that. Thank you so much, Will, I know this is probably not what you thought you'd be doing when you agreed to accept this position with Ravenswood. So welcome to the real estate world.
Any other questions or comments? I do have a question that I think I asked prior. What are Izzy's thoughts on the possible move to Castaño, and how have they been approached? Have they been asked? What do they think about that?
Had a number of conversations with Izzy. They're disappointed to move. They like the space. They want to remain in the space. They hope to return to the space long term. We're early in the conversations with them about going to Castaño. There's been holidays and maternity leave on their side, just to sort of iron out some of the logistics. So I don't know at this point if that's a great marriage or not. I think there's a lot of things that go into that. They do like the idea of being co-located at a school site and being a Ravenswood feeder. So they are excited about the possibility, but I think there's still a lot of open questions about whether or not the marriage makes sense overall. So I don't know that I have a good answer for that one right now. Trustee Bloom, I think the hope here is that we do have some time to figure out if that makes sense, or if it doesn't, if there's another space that we could find for them.
Okay. And how did they feel about the 1 year, possible 2 year options?
I think if there's one thing I've learned doing real estate is that everybody would like as long a lease as possible. And I think that this board's made clear that that's not necessarily in our interest. So they would certainly like long-term stability in their location, right? So that's obviously what they would like. So they don't love this, but they understand what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. And so they're amenable to this particular lease extension.
Any other comments?
Thank you, President Varghese Bloom. Just to make sure I'm understanding, they are using 2 rooms, and they would be moved to where, those 2 rooms?
So, well, go ahead, Mr. Eager. So the question is that they're using 2 rooms currently, but they have a lease for all 12. And so then they would be moving to Castaño or possibly as a recommendation if they choose to.
Yeah, correct.
Gotcha. Yeah, I didn't know if they were staying there and then we were using the 10 rooms, or if they were moving to Castaño now. Got it, but it's 2 rooms. Okay, thank you.
I have another question, just a logistical Los Robles question. So I saw there's 12 classrooms, correct?
Correct.
And right now there are 2 kindergarten classrooms and I think 2 second grade. Like, does all the math add up for those years to include the TK classroom plus the kindergarten classrooms plus Los Robles's projected growth to continue to into 5th grade?
It will not be comfortable, I guess I should say, is probably the short answer. I do believe that it would be, specials might be on carts, for example, right? And so we're sort of real about that with the staff, and that I think the focus would be on getting homerooms into those 12 classrooms and then potentially move specials around. I'm trying to pull up the specific number of rooms at Los Robles. I don't have that off the top of my head. But I do think the school could very, very, very closely fit on that site. It's possible we would need a temporary classroom or 2.
Okay.
Through the chair.
Yes.
With the movement of Izzy over to Castaño, would they, because we're going to eventually be doing Castaño as well, yes?
Yeah.
So with the moving of Izzy there, where are we going to put them at Castaño? Do we have a place that's set up that's like maybe next to the kinder TK area, or are we giving them new buildings? Because they're coming out of some pretty nice little buildings there. What would our plan be with the Izzy site if once the Los Robles kids move back to Los Robles? So kind of 2 questions. Sorry.
And sorry, I pulled up the map of Los Robles. I think it has about 18 classrooms. So it would be tight, but I think it's probably close. Trustee Alexander, I don't know. So there's 2 questions. Short term, I don't know exactly where they would go. The site used to be a lot bigger. Obviously, used to have 600, 700 students on the site now, and now it's about half that. So we do think there are rooms available potentially in the old 49er area. But we're still working through that with the site leadership team. again, trying to make sure there's more of a programmatic fit, and then we'll work on the specific space, but we do think there's enough possibilities to make sense there. And then two, we have not started the overall site design plan for Castaño. So fairly speculative, but in sort of kicking some ideas around, it does seem like there may be a way to have a small alternative drop-off early childhood area that has a slight play area more on the north corner of the campus, kind of near where that back parking lot is at the school, but very, 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 very speculative. So short term, I do believe there's space. Long term, I think there's the potential to actually fit a long-term home there. Not 12 classrooms of a long-term home, but some number of classrooms as a long-term home on the Castaño site. But I haven't quite sort of cracked exactly where it would go.
And then Will, the question was, what would we do with the Izzy site? If Izzy and Castaño decide to partner and Izzy is located at Castaño, then we have an open campus.
And it's a little bit up to the board. This would be in 2026, I believe. So it's still quite a ways out. But if Izzy was very happy there, we could put another early childhood program there. We know there's a need for that. We could lease this to another site. We could do teacher housing there. Any number of options. I think that the board at that point would have to make some decisions, but it does seem like the possibilities are endless.
Yes.
I just had a question. Do we know, because I'm seeing that we submit to the DSA in June. Does it generally take them that long to approve something that we have to wait until October, or?
It can. They're also, the specific office that approves things is particularly backed up right now. And so it doesn't always, but it's not unheard of for them to take a pretty significant amount of time.
So the dates in black are like the last possible, if that's the deadline, like if it's not done by then we punt, but it could potentially go faster.
It could potentially go faster. It'd be great if it went faster. I never assume that. Look, if we get DSA approval on November 3rd instead of October 31st, we wouldn't, we're not going to be draconian here. But I think, if we got DSA approval at the end of November, frankly, I'd be nervous about our ability to actually begin construction in June of 2024. And if that June of 2024 is really beginning in August of 2024, that means the campus wouldn't open until September, October of 2026. And that's just too disruptive. So we would punt in that case.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions?
Through the chair, I just want to say, this is an example of why flexibility with facilities is important. There are things that come up that you don't realize in situ. And so just know where my heart is. I want us to always be able to use the resources. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. It sounds like there may be people who want to join the facility subcommittee. Or stay on it. Just putting that out there. So thank you, Will, for that. I think that, I'm going to keep my comments to a minimum because I am a Los Robles parent and a former Izzy parent as well. So I was asking very specific questions. I do think it's great, especially if you've talked to staff and teachers and, just as Trustee Latu stated, to make sure that we're letting our community know the projects that we have going and the timelines we have going, so they understand the disruptions, and also hopefully cheer us on for, renovating and updating our facilities as well, and coming to see our nice spaces and enrolling in our nice spaces. So, with that, I will entertain a motion unless there's any other comments. With that, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion for these items. So I'm going to start with item 8.
The chair, I move to approve item 6A. consideration to accelerate Los Robles construction.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries 5-0. All right, I will entertain a motion for item 6B.
I will make a motion to approve item 6B, consideration to approve a ground lease extension with Izzy.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. I will consider a motion for item 6C.
Through the chair, I'll make a motion to approve item 6C.
I second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The item carries 5-0. All right, thank you. Now, thank you, Mr. Eager, for your time. I don't think you're doing the next one. Feel better. All right.
Oh, Solomon.
So we're gonna go ahead and move on to item 7. New legislation on the status of teleconference meetings, AB 2449.
Thank you.
Thank you. It allows for our governing board to participate remotely for 2 circumstances. One is just cause, which allows the governing board to consider and take action on a request from a member to participate remotely in a meeting, or to participate in a meeting for emergency circumstances. So the 2 circumstances are just cause and emergency circumstances. It went into effect as of the 1st of this year and will continue to be and remain in effect until 2026. This is new grounds for remote attendance, does not rely on the fact that you have to have COVID, right? So it does require that at least a quorum of our board governance team is physically present in the room. Okay, so to go into the 2 circumstances, the first one is for just cause, which means that a board member can make an announcement, as soon as possible, but also on the day of the meeting to indicate that they need to participate remotely for just cause. And this is something that can only be used 2 times by a board member. And the following reasons are, didn't realize I haven't shifted. Y'all. Oh, there we go.
Through
Pardon
the
me?
chair, 2 times per what?
Only 2 times to use the circumstance for just cause, and the reasons. Year.
Okay, a calendar year.
Calendar.
Or a school year.
2 chances.
Per calendar year for the following reasons: for childcare reasons, for a parent, a child, a grandparent, a grandchild, sibling, spouse, that would require you to participate remotely, or for a contagious illness, not solely for COVID, and for any related physical or mental disability that could not be accommodated, or travel while on official business.
Through the chair. With this though, because presently with enough notice, we have been able to attend meetings remotely. So does that still exist?
Yes.
So regardless of this is like for emergency, like up until even the day of, where
That is
before you had to give, before the agenda was posted.
Or even at the meeting.
Huh.
You're remote. So it says here at the start of a regular meeting. So the previous mode of doing it still in effect,
Yeah.
but usually that is in advance and posted publicly on the agenda, right? And this does not require the public posting of the agenda of you needing teleconferencing and having your address listed.
Gotcha. So you could, if I were in Texas for some reason. Okay. If I were in Texas visiting family, then as long as I'm giving notice, because it doesn't mean necessarily just cause, then I can participate remotely. Thank you.
So that's for just cause. And for this one, no vote is needed. But again, you only are able to use this option twice in a calendar year.
We have all.
And through the chair, I know you're gonna continue, but so this might be off track, but we were talking earlier about open comments or comments from the floor. And if you're having a hybrid meeting and who gets to make comments, right? If it's just the people in person, is it also people who are remote? And so there's some cases when you're remote, when you do have open comment, and some cases where you don't, or when
Yeah,
you
I will.
you'll
Can
talk
I
about
get to that point?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, not a problem. Just so we're aware that there's also emergency circumstances. And this is though where a the governing board must take a vote to accept the emergency circumstance, where the board member is presenting a 20-word general description of why the emergency circumstance, what is the emergency circumstance? And and so the board needs to vote to approve this emergency circumstance. So that means a physical or family medical emergency that prevents them from being able to attend. And there is no limit to this. And you also have to be present, show your face, and indicate the rationale. And this too is of the day of the meeting.
And just to be clear, because it does say you need to show your face, right? So your video has to be on in order to utilize these things.
And with these two circumstances, because it does permit trustees to make this request at the start of a meeting, right before a meeting, after the board meeting the agenda has been published, this requirement, the passing of this and utilizing AB 2449 requires then that we have the public be able to make virtual comments, be able to make public comment virtually.
At every
If we
board meeting.
approve and move forward with implementing AB 2449.
So if we approve this, if we approve AB 2449 today, because we don't know when board members will have to use this emergency thing, every board meeting needs to be able to allow virtual comments to happen in case
A trustee.
a
needs to be up
trustee needs to use this. So that
We-
means
we
that
may-
we're also choosing to allow virtual comments and questions.
And and how would we do that? Our team is working on having that feature be implemented. It's very similar to, through the chair, it's very similar to how our presenter, our CBO presented virtually. There would be a link. I'm actually speaking with the executive director of technology, assistant director of technology here, but I believe it would be very similar, that there would be a link, like a webinar, and then they would be able to have access and promote to speak. And it would require our trustees to have devices in front of us, very similar to how Sequoia Unified High School District runs their board meetings. And the clerk would need to manage and support with recognizing if we have speakers virtually, what have you.
Any other comments and questions?
Through the chair.
Yes.
It says when you go into the attachment, it's an action item, but it's not listed as an action item on the agenda, like consideration to approve. So I'm wondering, are we voting today or are we just discussing?
No, we would be voting
If-
today.
On the sorry, on the online agenda, it does say agenda type action item, but it doesn't say it in the title, but it is.
Can we
And
list
it also,
it for consistency going forward?
Yeah,
with the
yes.
agendas?
and it also asks for the board's recommendation to approve.
So
Me, this is what you want.
going forward, I just wanted, there were two things, right? So direction is that we need to make sure that our agenda item states consideration to approve. If it is an action item, not just say action item in the agenda type on the online. Okay, and then the second question.
Through the chair is, you're saying you would like us to approve this. That's your recommendation.
That would be our recommendation. But again, it's the trustees, and this actually is for the trustees to have the availability, the option to be able to teleconference during these circumstances.
One more question. So there was 2 times you could use the just cause. Does that include the emergency circumstances also?
The emergency circumstances can be used however many times. But the emergency circumstances would require quorum, both require quorum in person. And the emergency circumstances requires approval from the board who are present.
So you have to have the 20-word request for the emergency circumstances, but you can do that as many times, and it requires us to say yes or no.
And that would be through the chair in the meeting.
Yes,
So just, okay.
but if you have just cause, I don't think you need to do that.
And there is a system and process we could have in place where the trustees can make the request, and then we can document the number of uses of the just cause. So that we don't use that circumstance.
Through the chair, question. If we do this and we have one of these these days that we need to use, and we have to do and it's like right there and then, had emergency or, whatever it is, and we have to say, or, whatever the emergency is, and the meeting's about to start, what do we do? Text, like, board president saying, I need to invoke this, or, I mean, how it says you have to do it if, we have to present your reason. It could be after the meeting has started, but if you're not here because of the emergency, how do you do that?
So what if we created a procedure in which links would be distributed before the meeting? And then when they added, someone will make note if there's a board member that's on the waiting room and announce it.
I would imagine we would want to work out those logistics, have technology devices ready. And because it would now be available to the public, there will be a link for folks to be able, and so we would have that access for trustees. I would have to look into when in the meeting, like if a trustee is running late and is not able to join for one of these circumstances, at which point can we take a vote to have them be able to join the meeting? I would need to follow up with that, but I would imagine it's kind of like a trustee coming in, maybe arriving late to a meeting, but I would need to verify. Yes.
Solomon Hill, Executive Director of Technology. We would, before every meeting, send a customized link to all of you, just in case, for a Zoom. We would basically do what we did during COVID, for those of you who are here. We'd always do it via Zoom. We'd invite the public as well to access the meeting via Zoom. We would also show it on YouTube, which we actually did during COVID, though most accessed it via Zoom. And so it would always be there. You'd always have a link. If you needed to invoke not being there, you should direct it to the board president and maybe CC me and Gina, I think, text-wise or email-wise. And I think we really tried to make this our practice, this meeting. We have to do a little bit about audio for people who don't have good, for the public who might not have good sound. So we're going to have to do a little bit something. But other than that, I think we went okay. I think we'll be all right. And I think we mostly have a procedure in place based on our previous experience. Thank you.
Through the chair.
Yes.
So we vote yes, this is in place. How long does that term last? Like, is it perpetuity or is it like a year and then you can vote again to say if we, I don't know, for some reason, we're like, actually, it's not worth it and the system's too crazy. You know what I mean? Like,
I feel like it would probably be through 2026 whenever the legislation is done, because it depends upon what California legislation is. That's what I would assume, but
I don't have the exact answer to that, but my assumption is that as well. Unless at the end of the calendar year, we can reflect on how this process went as a governance team.
but yeah, so that's what I'm hoping we have the option to do,
Mhm.
but if.
I don't
but
have the exact
automatic-
answer to
yeah.
that.
Okay.
should we wait to vote on this for next, like just for the January meeting and then get the answer on that?
I have no problem going back and if
Is that
that's the
something that-
direction of the board.
Nay.
I wonder if also this not be here, what if we do this for, like 3 or 4 board meetings and we realize it's just not. working.
I would consider that some board meetings having the option of the public being able to make comments virtually and some meetings not, and then what topics were covered that might feel like there was some biases in terms of certain meetings having that access to the public or not remotely. I mean, granted, they can already participate and observe the meeting, but they're not able to interact, right?
Unless they come first.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Can we move this to a closed session conversations?
No.
Um,
Are there any, so there is one question about, can we take a vote after the year to determine if we want to consider implementation of 2449?
What was that?
I think the question is, if we were to vote to take, if we were to vote yes or no on AB 2449, how long is that yes a yes? Or a no a no? Like, when can it come back up? Like, is it at the end of the year or is it at the end of the legislation? Like, how long the legislation is effective?
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have an option to renege after
Right. We say
moving
yes.
forward.
So that's the question.
This is an option. We don't have to follow any whatever.
That is my understanding, because this gives flexibility to the trustees. The trustees can elect to have this flexibility or not, but if we do elect to have this flexibility, that means too, we give the public the option to participate and make comments virtually.
But sorry. For the chair, I think there should be a clause in which we can say we approve item XYZ for the school year, blah, 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 from this date until this date.
I would need,
And then we would revisit. So I would ask county council, because I'm pretty sure we can say for this fiscal year, we as a board agree, we move to pass blah, 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 blah for this year. And then if we vote yes, and then it would have to come back for yearly renewal.
happy to ask.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, well, I guess we have no more comments on item 7, so I'm going to go ahead and say item 8, the next regular board meeting will be held on January 26, 2023 at 6:30 PM and open session at 7:15, but we also have that one event before open session, the school update.
So Cesar Chavez Ravenswood Middle School will be presenting on the 26th. And because we do have children participating in the presentation, I conferred with trustees individually. And that we would like to present to the board. The school would like to present to the board, but I would like to offer that we start at 6:30 with their presentation and then go into closed session.
Yeah, so there will be one item before closed session. And then closed session, and then we will come back for open session again at 7:15.
Through the chair, do we think that coming back to closed session at 7:15 is reasonable? From closed session, if we have the Cesar Chavez presentation and then we go into closed session, will we be actually be back or should we
I
do?
think it's an estimate, and so at least we would have notification online too, if folks are online, or potentially when we would be returning back to open session from closed session.
Okay.
I
Through
can't
the chair,
guarantee
just a
what
reminder that this is an agendized conversation.
at the start of the meeting.
No, this discussion that we're having right now is an agendized.
No, we're
It's-
just actually talking about the regular meeting being scheduled for the 26th at 6:30.
Okay, so I'll
Thank
go
you.
ahead and